you didn't realize at first how it actually made history, until years later. And it's like, wow, you did actually, you know, made history in the labor force, right? Well, you did. You're doing something right, and something right for women and for the next generation and the next generation.
If 80 women 43 years ago could leave that and change the Ontario labor law and labor movement, then it can be done.
In March of 1978, in Huron Park, Ontario, more than 80 women walked off the job and into the history books. These women worked at the Fleck factory producing wire harnesses for cars. Working at Fleck meant enduring conditions that were so horrible, a local doctor called it the Butchershop.
It was crappy working conditions, shit money. We used to tape our fingers up with electrical tape so you wouldn't get wires stuck in your fingers. And I remember a lot of times having to go to the doctor for him to pull the wires out because, you'd go home, take the tape off, you still have pieces of wire in your fingers. The bathrooms were crap. There's 4 or 5 stalls, and half the time only one worked.
I hate to say this, but they wouldn't have treated men the way they treated us. I know you couldn't leave your line to go to the bathroom without permission, and a supervisor would come with you and wait outside the bathroom door. That kind of thing went on all the time. And again, many of them put up with it because they needed the job. And you were told if you didn't do it this way, there's the door.
It wasn't fair when you looked around and you're the only factory in Huron Park that hired women, and men were making way more than us. So it wasn't fair, right? Of course. Women always get shafted.
The unsafe working conditions and low pay drove the women to unionize in 1977. The newly formed union advocated for higher wages for the women. They were also fighting for the implementation of the RAND formula, a regulation that makes union dues mandatory for all those who receive support from the union. This helps to guarantee union security and worker protection.
For smaller workplaces looking for their first contract, you need the union stabilized, and the RAND formula helped to do that. The women at Fleck needed it. They absolutely needed it because with a management so intent on not having a union, it helped to give them a little bit of stability so that they could move beyond a first contract to a second contract and so on. But the fact that the employers didn't want to do it was simply another indication that they were going to try and undermine the union.
I remember when we were coming home from negotiations, when they broke down, Sheila and I and Fran were in the car. And then 3 of us were talking, and we were saying, we couldn't believe that we were going out on strike. It just shut down so quick. And we thought, now we've got to go back and tell the people. When we were trying to organize in the plant, we kept putting signs up around the plant to organize that. And the company would come around and they'd rip the signs down. And Sheila, she was big, loud, funny, and she went and she wrote it on her t-shirt. And she wore that t-shirt all day long. And everybody kept running over to look at it and read it and everything and laughing. And it was really funny at that point that we were getting a chuckle, that we were getting the word out.
I would think the Friday before we actually went on strike, or in around there, those last few days, they called all of us into the lunchroom. And there were several OPP officers there and the managers. And we were told what we could and could not do as far as striking went. But it was also threatening. But it didn't make us back down. As a matter of fact, it probably riled most of us up. At any given time, there'd be 15 or 20 women on the picket line, because we did it in shifts. And we in the middle of winter, like March, we were 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you just walked around in a circle. And if a truck came in, you slowed the truck down. We couldn't stop anyone from coming in, but as you've seen on many picket lines, you can slow it down, and that's what we did. For the most part, there'd be 15 of us just chatting, what are your kids doing? What's for supper tonight? Those kind of things.
I was out on the picket line with all the other women. We just marched in front of the building on the street, some were carrying signs, some of us were just marching back and forth. I remember it being cold because it was in March that this strike occurred, but there was always a pot of fire burning that we could gather around to keep warm. And we also had a little hall in Centralia that we would gather at. There was always hot coffee there and snacks for us.
On March the 7th, the company started busing workers in. They were going right through the picket line, so I was on the bus door, and I gave it a few good boots trying to get in. And the next thing I know, I'm going flying through the air, and then I went into a snowbank. The police were there, and they just grabbed me by the back of the coat, just threw me up in the snowbank.
We just banded together, and if one of us was being harassed by the cops, we were all right there to split it up and say, go away, you're not doing this. And I know the police were probably only doing their job, but it was very, very heavy-handed. I'd never seen anything like it in my life.
The Ontario government spent more than $2.5 million to cover the 7,000 police hours dedicated to the strike. This money would have been more than enough to cover the women's demands for wage increases for 3 years. Not only did the strikers face backlash from the police, but the threats of violence spread beyond the picket line.
You didn't talk to your neighbor anymore. You didn't you didn't talk to your cousin anymore because you were on different sides. And there were some things the police did that you just kind of shook your head at, that, like following you home. I was followed home by 2 cruisers, and I'm like, I'm just walking.
One night when I was home, I got a phone call that I was going to die the next morning at the picket line. So I went to the picket line and I made sure the girls told the girls, so they all huddled around me and didn't let anybody near me at all.
As the strike continued, support from the United Auto Workers Union was strong. This meant that workers joined the strike from other plants, bringing with them both solidarity and, occasionally, escalated tension on the line.
So 250 Ford workers from Talbotville walked off the job, came to the picket line, and there were 2 taken to hospital during altercations. The OPP showed up in full force with police bullets, billy sticks, and on the adjacent roofs of buildings with cameras. We had a small group of supporters with us when we were on the loading dock doors picketing. Someone said, "Keep moving," that we are allowed to picket as long as we are moving. The police got in a parade formation and started marching towards us with billy sticks raised. The command was given. And I remember an officer who's beside me questioning, "Really? You want us to go in and hit these women?" The commander said, "You heard the order." I got hit in the stomach, but not hard.
You had women who just wanted a first contract, and they wanted a first contract with the RAND formula in it, which most big unionized workplaces had. And they immediately faced scabs being brought in, protected by the police. You had an incredible police presence of OPP officers, hundreds of OPP officers to, keep these 80 women or whatever in line. And there was immediately pictures of violence, of the women being pushed around by the police, of police in riot gear. So it symbolized the incredible power imbalance there was between strikers and their employers.
You can't get the check off, then the people who don't pay dues will tell other people, or will just say, well, I'm not paying dues, I'm getting all the protection without paying dues, so I won't. So it was an existential strike in the sense that not only would not get a contract, but the very RAND formula itself would be threatened. So we had to bring all of our resources to bear, and that would be the women's movement as well. And I got a phone call. from Deirdre Gallagher from Organized Working Women. She said, I understand you're trying to pull together a women's picket. So I said, yes, we are. And she said, well, I'd like to help. Put a leaflet out and leafleted the women's movement in Toronto and the various labor centrals and various unions. And the deal was you could pay $4 to get on a school bus in the middle of the night and drive down to Centralia as part of a women's picket to close the plant. So, and 400 people signed up. Of course, the Toronto cops had phoned ahead to the police in the Centralia area and said, there's 400 women coming on school buses. You may want to think about not opening the plant today. And they didn't. The strikers met Toronto women, and Toronto women met the strikers. And it was just an unprecedented success. And it affected the union for the next decades.
While support had been gained and the women continued to put themselves on the picket line, the strike drew on. The factory operated at 1/3 of its normal capacity, using the labor of those who were willing to cross the picket line, and management showed no sign of relenting. Still, the Fleck women refused to back down.
One of our favorite songs that we used to play a lot was by Queen. We Are the Champions. Because we did keep on fighting till the end, and there was a real feeling of solidarity amongst us.
After 5 months of picketing, Fleck management agreed to grant the women a pay increase and allowed the inclusion of the RAND formula in their union agreement in exchange for their return to work. The Fleck women's struggle was central to the amendment of the Ontario Relations Act that guaranteed that the RAND formula could no longer be rejected by employers as it had been in the case of the Fleck workers. The women also pushed the United Auto Workers unions to fight for their female members, advocating for childcare support, better maternity leave, and proper preventative measures for sexual assault.
Historically, it became sort of symbolic of this effort to have a conversation, to build alliances, to create some synergies between feminism and labor. It was not an alliance that was always easy at all, but it was an alliance that I think both sides recognized had to be built. I will say, when we talk at this level, about alliances and so on, we shouldn't forget the women who were on that picket line. I mean, for them, it was a historic struggle too, because they were fighting against incredible odds in a situation none of them, I think, really imagined. I mean, facing down all these police, and they did it with incredible courage and dignity. So that's important too.
You were nervous. And then the more you were out there, the more you had the support from your, brothers and sisters. You felt invincible, okay?
Of course, we were afraid to go out because that was our livelihood. We didn't know if we would have a job to go back to. But, with the help of many other people, we succeeded. Took us 5 months, but we did get back in there. 80 women 43 years ago believed that and changed the Ontario labor law and labor movement. Then it can be done.